All right, let's learn about how to work with dates and times in Java. And as like always, Java has a lot of pre-built functionality. So someone long ago made some classes that we're going to use in order to work with dates and times in Java. The main one we're going to learn is local date and its cousin local date time. All right, so local date will give you just the date. All right, so we're going to use local date equals, and now you're not going to instantiate local date. What you're going to do is you're going to use local date and use the static method now. All right, so local date.now, and notice how it says public static, meaning you don't have to instantiate local date. All right, what does local date.now do? Well, it gives you the current date based on your system clock. All right, so remember, Java is going to look at your clock and basically say, hey, what's today's date? October 23rd, 2023, which is fantastic. All right, so if you want local date time, if you'd like to get just the date time together, so local date time dot now, all right, then we will run this and then we will see that we get both the date and the time. Maybe you just want the time. Maybe you don't want the date at all. Well, that's perfectly fine. You can do local time. Okay, I'm going to import it. Okay, it is local time is from java.time. All right, so if we go here and I run it, you'll be able to see that it's just the time aspect of the date, not the actual date itself. So sometimes you care about the date, sometimes you care just about the time, sometimes you care about both. So you pick local time, local date, or local date time depending on which thing you actually care about. Let's go back to local date because that's the most fun for right now and the one you're probably using a lot. All right, so you don't have to use the now method. Now will, of course, give you the current date, but let's say you had a specific date in mind. You can use of and then start putting in some arguments. First being the year, let's say 2022, and the month, let's say March, and then the day, we'll say 20th. All right, so as you can see, the of takes in the year, month, and day. If you don't want to use an integer for the month, you also can use the built-in enum. So if you want to do month.april.august or whatever you wanted to do, then you would be able to use that as well. All right, but I think an integer works just as well. All right, so we're going to do local date of 2022-3, and the day of the month is 20. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. All right, and see, there you go. Now you may be wondering, well, like I can create my own date, but then like what do I do with it? Right, local date has a lot of built-in functions that allow you to add time or remove time from the date. So if we do date, and then if you look at there's a plus method, all right, and then so you can see we have plus weeks, plus days, plus years, plus months. So you're able to add time to a current date. So let's go ahead and change this date. Let's do date equals date dot plus, I don't know, months 4. Okay, so we'll add 4 months to our date. Right, we'll go from month number 3 to month number 7. Right, there we go. So you're able to add months. And then, of course, the opposite of plus is minus. So you're able to minus days, minus months, weeks, and years. All right, so a lot of times in programming, you'll start off with a certain date and then need to calculate another date based off that date. So, for example, maybe there's like a employee is let into a company and then they have their 90-day review. Well, when is their 90-day review? Easy. You can just basically say date dot plus days 90, and then that will give you the date of their 90-day review. Things like that are very, very common. Now, the one thing you need to take special note of is that these plus days and minus days methods do not take into account like daylight savings time or switches in time zone or things like that. That is up to you, the programmer, to deal with those cases as you see fit. Time is very difficult when you start talking about like time zones and daylight savings time, all right? And so basically these classes are completely ignorant of that. Like local date does not know whether or not you're having daylight savings time when it passes from one like thing to another. It just does not know that. So keep that in mind when you're working with these methods. All right, now the next thing we need to do with dates is be able to format them because maybe we don't like this format. A lot of our programs may be used like overseas in like different countries, and different countries have different ways of displaying their dates. So it depends on a lot of things. So we want to be able to record time, but we want to be able to display it in different ways. In order to actually format the date, we're going to use another class called DateTimeFormatter, surprising no one. All right, and DateTimeFormatter allows you to take a string and say, okay, cool, like what format do I want? So we're going to do DateTimeFormatter.of pattern, and then we're going to give it a string, and then inside we're going to give it a pattern. The pattern we're going to give it is based off of these like letters up here. I put a little key up here to show you like, hey, these are the different letters you can use in the format to indicate different parts of the day and time. So for example, Y is year, capital M is month, lowercase d is day of the month, and yes, the capitals and uppercase and lowercase matters. All right, so let's say, for example, I don't want to do this format. I want to do day, month, year. All right, and I want slashes instead of dashes. I'll do day / month / year. All right, in which case I will be able to use this format as opposed to the default format. Now, I haven't actually applied this format to the local date just yet. In order to do that, I'm going to basically do string formatted date is equal to DTF, which is a formatter, dot format, and then I will pass in the local date object, which up here, and it will take my date and format it. So now I want to go ahead and print that to the console so you can see it. Bam, 2003-2022. All right, so with slashes as opposed to dashes. All right, so if you're in like the EU, okay, and then use dots, I believe, then you can go ahead and use dots. So you can format the date how you'd like to. Just keep in mind they have the stuff up top to indicate like which part of the day it is. Also, you'll notice I used like 2 D's and 2 M's. The reason I did that is because for lack of ambiguity, like if it's January, I wanted to say 01, or if it's February, I want to say 02. That way, like the 0 is in there, so there's no ambiguity with the date. All right, another cool thing you can do is take strings and parse them into dates. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to put a string here. I'll be like string date to parse is equal to 2303 1999. Okay, so I've got this string that I would like to parse into a date. Well, the datetime formatter and the local date object can help me. All right, so first off, this is day / month / 4-digit year. All right, so the format is going to be, this is what the format that I expect the string to be in. Yes, there's always going to be the risk of an exception when trying to format a date, so you're going to need a try catch in case something goes wrong, but I'll deal with a happy case. So right now I'm saying, okay, cool, I'm expecting a date of this pattern, and then now I'm going to basically say formatted date is equal to local date dot parse. And I'm going to pass in the date I want to parse along with the formatter to provide the pattern. All right, so now, let's see, what's it angry about? All right, because this will parse it into a local date. There we go, not a string. All right, so local date, you'll be able to parse a string, and then you're able to use a formatter to sort of parse the string to understand like what format you're expecting, and then be able to print it out. So I'm going to go ahead and print it out. All right, 1993-03-23. Now keep in mind, there's like I said, there's plenty of room for exceptions. So for example, let's say I change this format in here, even just a little bit. All right, and I run it, and I want to get like a very nasty exception because it's going to try to parse this as if it were a month, like 23, and there obviously is no month 23. All right, so keep that in mind when trying to use a datetime formatter. Okay, you could have a datetime parse exception, which will come from not properly getting the right format. So you have to use a try catch to try to catch that. Okay, but the datetime formatter is useful in that regard. All right, so now we know about local date, local time, and local date time. We also know how to take a string and parse into a local date. We also understand that local date allows us to use methods like minus and plus weeks, years, months, and days in order for us to manipulate time, which is fantastic. And we also know how to use local date to get the current time and current date, which is extremely useful. All right, I'm going to get rid of this example and show you something else that you may have to do during your job. So local date, let's do first date is equal to local date dot of, and I will do 2023, and then let's do October 1st. All right, then I have another date, local date second date equals local date dot of 2023. Let's do something earlier, May 23rd. All right, so I've got 2 dates, and maybe I'm really interested to know like how much time has passed in between these 2 dates. Here we're going to use chrono units, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Like, let's say I wanted to say how many days are between these two. So I'll do long days between equals chrono unit, which I thought sounds really cool. And then you pick basically like the unit of like half days, days, centuries, hours, millennia. I mean, they like really they really ham it up here. Let's just do days. So days between, all right, and then the between method will take two basically dates. So it's called temporal. So local date's temporal. So I'll do first date. Actually, we'll do second date to first date since second date came first. All right, and then I will S out days between. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. All right, 131 days. So there are 131 days from was this May 23rd, 2023 until October 1st, 2023. So you're able to get the length of time. Now, if you do the, like, switch them around, so let's say, like, I put the first date, which happens the second, like this date happens after this one, but I'm switching out their order, and you were trying to run it, then what you're going to notice is that the value is negative. Okay, it's not going to throw an exception. It's just going to basically say there's negative 131 days, which basically means that you put in the dates, like, flipped. So you put the date that happened the latest in front of the date that happened before it. All right, so nothing to worry about. You can just use that as a means of like deciding whether or not you put the correct date in the right order, whether or not I got a positive or negative value. Chrono unit is going to appear in different places, but I like using chrono unit in between to be able to tell the length of time between two different dates. All right, so hopefully this has been a good introduction in how to use dates in Java. There's, of course, much more to delve into, but this should get you started and will actually be useful for most of your programming tasks. So I'm glad you learned something about dates, and happy programming.